Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and today I wanted to talk about me failing to buy a supercomputer. Yeah, you heard that right, ladies and gentlemen. Now, you're looking at a US auction website right over here called GSA Auctions, alright? Now, if you're looking at this is the Cheyenne supercomputer. And if you've been following, computer stuff for the last couple days, you might have noticed that amongst all of the things available to buy was a supercomputer. So for most people following these days, the rap beef between two rappers is kind of the news. But for me, trying to purchase a supercomputer was something that was seriously in my considerations, and I failed. So to give you an idea of it, this is the current bid for it. The final bid, $480,000 US for the Cheyenne supercomputer. And it's been met, and this computer's been sold. This is something that I was seriously considering to the point where I wanted to purchase it alongside, or purchase it for myself, but I really wanted to work with other YouTubers as well. I sent out a few messages to Linus Tech Group, a few of the other tech channels right here, just to see if anybody could facilitate if I could just buy this computer and somebody may have had the space and the power requirements to run something like this. Unfortunately, the timing was too little. To set up the accounts for purchasing this was already a nuisance in of itself. You needed to get like all of your information, your FinTracks, everything to go. And honestly, the ability to get this much money on a dime was a challenge in of itself. Spending $500,000 to purchase the Cheyenne supercomputer was just really not worth the time. Now, from a money perspective, honestly, buying this, the whole point of us to purchase this was to make like a bit of content out of it, to show people things like breaking encryption using a supercomputer and how infeasible it is, even if you have some of the most top of the line systems out there and using all the distributed computing possible. It would show you that breaking encryptions and various easily occurred security like practices was almost an impossibility, right? Even with the Cheyenne supercomputer, or a lot of supercomputers in general, breaking things like encryption, which keeps a lot of your personal information private and secure from not just me, you, various prying eyes, but multiple governments, is something that I wanted to showcase. And amongst else, I wanted to kind of show you how gaming on a supercomputer was going to happen. Even though gaming on a supercomputer is really not that exciting, okay? When you take one node out of these supercomputers, the software just doesn't really translate that well over to something that is supposed to be designed to distribute its computing. So to give you an idea, the Cheyenne supercomputer, the water cooling system, basically this whole thing came with 14 different units weighing 1,500 pounds each. So the whole problem was to grab this thing and also ship it over to Canada, or potentially a warehouse that we would have probably gotten somewhere in the United States anyways. And then of course, beyond all of it, they ended up giving 4,032 dual socket units, right, nodes, and of course 8,064 processors, E5 2697 V4s, all right? And of course, these are 18-core processors, each with 2.3 gigahertz base frequencies, turboing up to 3.6 gigahertz as well. Total core-wise, you're looking at 145,152 cores, okay? As far as memory goes, boys and girls, you've got 64 gigs per node, basically totaling to 313,344 gigabytes of memory, okay? So this is a pretty hefty system. Now, to understand, running this required up to $3,000 to $4,000 US per day, from my understanding, based on current electrical prices to operate this computer. So aside from purchasing this for a meme, look, some people like to buy Ferraris and Lambos and mansions. Me, this would have been a great buy if it wasn't for the fact that it got priced out to no oblivion. Now, the person that did end up buying this, I highly understand that they're probably going to take this thing, gut it for parts, and sell it, and they'll actually make a profit out of it. The problem is we kind of considered that here, but the thing is, it just took way too much time out of our days to even consider doing that. So honestly, a lot easier to make money in other capacities versus trying to pimp out and price out and basically chop shop a supercomputer, even though that also, in retrospect, would have been a pretty banger video to talk about, okay? To chop shop an entire former US supercomputer. Now, supercomputers are, without a doubt, constantly evolving. And one thing that it's worth looking at, if you ever are interested in a topic like this is the top 500 list. So according to November 2023, the top 10, which is the top 10 supercomputers in the entire world right now, are all categorized in a list. So for instance, in the top supercomputer, that belongs to Oak Ridge National Laboratory, okay? And that is in the United States, and they are looking at 8.6, basically 8.7 million cores, okay? And the power requirements on this are astra-fucking-nomical. So yeah, that's a lot of goddamn cores available. And the petaflops, which again, these are really, really fast computers, really, really designed for distributed work, that's what they're listed at. So of course, the top 3 are located in the United States. After that, you get to the Fugaku in Japan, you get to the Lumi in Finland, and then Italy, the US, Spain, in the United States. Again, the US kind of holds a monopoly on a lot of these supercomputers, okay? At least the top ones that are available. Now you might be wondering, but Muda, why would anybody need to use a supercomputer for, okay? What is the use for something this goddamn powerful? Does it allow you to do like crazy things like simulate entire worlds within? No, supercomputers are used for things like quantum mechanics, forecasting the weather, oil and gas exploration, and climate research. So the way that these things work is they're designed to run multiple simulations upon simulations upon simulations, and using the distributed power and the available power already, we're able to simulate a bunch of things that supercomputers are able to do with the amount of actual processing that they are capable of when you distribute all of it. Now, the thing is, all of the supercomputers, or at least the world's fastest ones, also run entirely on Linux. And one of the things about Linux is supercomputing is such a weird form where, to an extent, even the United States military, when they wanted to build a supercomputer cluster, the US Air Force had purchased 1,760 PlayStation 3 systems to use them to build a distributed supercomputing cluster. So if you don't know the story of the Condor supercluster, this image is a little low resolution, but these are all PlayStation 3s basically lined up, connected to each other, all designed to run in parallel and create what is a supercomputer cluster. And that is the PlayStation 3 system. So back in the day when the PS3 dropped, it came with a feature known as Other OS, which allowed users to install Linux onto it. So the Army, before this feature was taken away by Sony, they had basically installed Linux, connected these devices together, and created a supercomputing cluster that they used in the Army. And apparently it became a pretty fucking good supercomputer to the point where it was able to output 500 teraflops, and this is back in 2010 that this was reported. So it's actually kind of funny too, because when you look at the history of supercomputing in Sony, this wasn't the first time any military was alleged to use it. Back in the day, a group, a news site known as the WorldNet Daily, had, I guess, falsely reported that 4,000 PlayStation 2 systems were being bought up by Saddam fucking Hussein. I made a video on this like probably 6 years ago where I talked about this whole story, but the idea was, it was alleged that Saddam had purchased all these PlayStation 2 supercomputers, or PlayStation 2 systems, basically got Linux installed from my understanding, and jerry-rigged it together to make a PlayStation 2 era supercomputer. And according to Euro Daily at the time, what they had basically said, WorldNet Daily, was that a single PlayStation can generate up to 75 million polygons per second. So again, these are extremely useful in military design and modeling applications. Bundled PlayStation computers can be used to calculate ballistic data for long-range missiles or in the design of nuclear weapons, dude. But one of the claims that apparently they made was an integrated bundle of 12 to 15 PlayStations could provide enough computing power to control an Iraqi unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV. God damn! Nowadays, an iPhone could probably control multiple UAVs, for crying out loud. But these were one of those hoaxes that people just like to laugh at. But going back to the Cheyenne supercomputer, it was decommissioned, and parts of the supercomputer were being sold simply because the failure rate had started to reach. From my understanding, something with the memory had started to cause more failures, and at that point, it was just time to decommission it and basically rely on the more powerful supercomputers that existed. Now, of course, in the world of supercomputers out there, you could buy this for your own personal research, but I think the juice isn't worth the squeeze. The person buying this could probably get it working up and again, but it's probably worth more to just gut this thing out and sell it for parts at that point. That's the only way that an actual investment could probably bear fruit, if you will, on this situation. But yeah, this is actually one thing that we wanted to buy, but because of obviously the meme of it, but corresponding with $500,000 going towards purchasing a supercomputer, it just wasn't a thing that was going to reasonably happen. Had we probably had like a month or two extra on this auction, maybe we would seriously consider it. But honestly, the fact that this thing initially started out and like somebody put like a bid up for like $50, but it just evolved. We all knew this was going to sell for like 6 figures at some point. So again, it really became a situation of it's not really worth it to go buy this thing, even if it is for the meme or a little bit for the content. And honestly, you were just going to get outbid anyways by somebody that was literally going to chop shop this thing up and sell it for parts anyways. But yeah, one of the world's most famous supercomputers, if you will, too, the Cheyenne, was in news. That ended up basically being sold off, and now it has become a gutted, chop shop legacy of computing past. But yeah, supercomputers are interesting, and maybe one day we'll build something smaller on a much smaller scale. But yeah, something I wanted to buy, but ultimately time and money really prevented us from getting access to what is ultimately a pretty cool piece of history. That said, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, this is me, Mutahar, and yeah, I am out.